Hello all. Thank you all that have joined. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. We're at the 1 o'clock mark. My name is Josh Swinson. I'll introduce the rest of our panelists in just a second, but we'll give it just a minute and then we'll get started. Thanks again to all of you that are joining. I know for some of you, it's still morning time. You're just getting started with your day. For some of you, perhaps if some of our Australian friends are on, or our Middle East friends, I know it's different times of the day for all of those, and we have the pleasure of working with all of you day in and day out. And so a good morning or good afternoon to you all. Let's go ahead and get started. The topic for today's webinar is the evolution of GIS and SAP integration strategies for a modern utility. And I just wanted to point out one piece of housekeeping quickly, and that is that if you have any questions throughout the webinar, we welcome those. We encourage you to share those, and you can do so through the top right portion of your interface. It might be a drop-down that you have to expand, but in the WebEx interface, there's a Q&A portion of your screen that you can submit to all panelists. We'll see those questions, and we do have time carved out at the end to answer your questions. Also, if you're joining in just at this point, or if you have to leave at any point, we will be recording this. We will be sharing this out at the end of the webinar. In the next day or two, we'll share this out with you. You'll get a recording of this webinar, which will include the slides as well. So thank you again for taking the time to join today. And I'll introduce the group of guests that are here, the group of presenters that I have with us, and then we're going to turn our screens off just for performance issues as we go through the slides. But as I said, my name is Josh Swinson. I'm the VP of Revenue Operations for GeoNexus. And I'm happy to be joined today by Umesh Menon, who's our head of product at GeoNexus and leads all things product management, and by Joe Britton, who's a principal consultant at TRC, formerly Locana, and I promised him that that would be the only time I said TRC, formerly Locana. From here on out, we'll just refer to our friends there as TRC. And so, Umesh, Joe, thank you for joining us. And we also have with us today Elena O'Connor, who leads marketing here with GeoNexus, is a big piece of what we do from a marketing perspective and has helped to put on this webinar. So thank you all for joining. Appreciate that. And with that, we'll get started here with a quick agenda. All right, so many things to cover today. We will take up the better part of the hour. We'll introduce our two companies. We're going to talk about who GeoNexus is and who TRC is and what we do, just so that you have a baseline foundation. And then I'll turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to talk about the current state of the industry, the utilities industry, how integrations are driving the utility industry, the projects they're working on, and then move into the current state of GIS and SAP integration. And Joe will talk to you about a lot of the projects that he's working on. And the real goal here is to take you kind of out into the wild, if you will, and help you understand what other utilities are working on, what decisions they're trying to make, and what strategies they're trying to either go to or evolve to from an integration perspective. And then from there, we'll turn it over to Umesh, and he'll pick up the topic with the same idea, bringing you out into what conversations we're having around integrations, what approaches organizations are looking at as they modernize their stance on integrations, as they modernize their ecosystem around all the different systems that they're working with. And then we'll talk specifically about what we're seeing in our conversations between our two companies and as independent companies, specifically around SAP integration. And then lastly, we do want to share a quick excerpt of a video of the GeoNexus integration platform and do a demo of that product so that you get some real life experience into what the product does. And then lastly, as I said, we'll do some Q&A. Perfect. And so with that, I'll start with a quick introduction of GeoNexus. For those of you that are not familiar, if this is your first introduction to GeoNexus, or you've heard of us and don't know exactly what we do, GeoNexus is a software company, right? We're a software company that is focused on geospatial integration. That's really our specialty. We've been around for about 15 years, with our founders having about 25 years of experience in integrations in the utility space, specifically integrating geospatial systems into the ecosystem as a whole for utilities, water, wastewater, electric, gas. We also serve pipelines, transportations, universities, facilities, right? And so, serving all of these industries by providing them with a software product, a platform that we call the GeoNexus integration platform. And it's a fully supported and proven platform for system integration. Just for those that are keeping score on kind of GeoNexus names, perhaps you're familiar with GeoWorks Sync. If you've heard that terminology before, that is kind of the 2.0 version of our product. We've moved to the 3.0, or I think it's the 3.2.2 now. Umesh can keep me honest on that. But what we refer to that generally as is the GeoNexus integration platform. That's the current version of the platform. You'll hear it referred to throughout this presentation as both GeoNexus, GIP, or the GeoNexus integration platform. So all of those are the platform that we provide. And then what it does at a foundational level, to give you kind of the 30,000 foot view, and Umesh will drill down into this. The real idea of GIP is to provide you with out-of-the-box tools and functionality that make it easy to both set up and, most importantly, or as importantly, manage an integration over its life cycle, right? So by giving you these library of connectors that have the business logic understanding for each of these systems, they give you tools specific to each of these systems, it makes it easy to connect GeoNexus to it, make GeoNexus the middleware between your integration, and really through those out-of-the-box tools in a no-code, low-code approach, it allows you to simplify the configuration or the setup of an integration, right? And then once that's done, it automates the synchronization of data. Joe will talk a little bit about some choices you have around, and best practices around segmenting data for your synchronization, for your integration. And GeoNexus really empowers this, right? It automates that synchronization of data, gives you some flexibility over how you decide to set up your data for synchronization. And then lastly, it provides you active reporting, right? So out of the box reporting that helps you understand that, one, your integration is running as intended, and two, it gives you some error and issue notification and a low level of detail with those. So if something does go wrong, you have the ability to jump in quickly and fix it, right? And so it eliminates that need for, building some kind of reporting out of a bunch of log files, or, not knowing where to go once you understand that the integration is the cause of the problem that you're trying to fix, right? And so high level, that's what GeoNexus does. I'll now turn it over to Joe, who's going to talk about what TRC does and then lead us through the state of the industry and into some best practices and projects. Joe?
Thanks a lot, Josh. So nice to meet you all. My name is Joe Brenton. I have spent over 20 years working in the GIS industry. I'm a geographer by trade, and most of that's been in consulting. I think it was almost 15 years ago, the first time I worked with folks from the GeoNexus team on a GAS Esri implementation and synchronization to Maximo. So, myself as well as TRC has a long history of integrating critical business systems, and GeoNexus is definitely a big partner in that. So for those of you that aren't familiar with TRC, we are an engineering-focused, a utility-focused engineering firm. We work primarily in North America and Europe, and you can kind of think of TRC as a utility that just doesn't have any of the assets. And I know that's a little bit interesting to say, but we have teams of folks that would design and then could build a distribution substation for your utility. We also have folks that sit as operators and control centers at many of the utilities across our clients. Similarly, we have folks who are performing vegetation management for some of the largest utilities on the West Coast. But we also have our own, technology-focused veg management solutions that we deploy for other clients. So we really do, you know, a technology-focused engineering firm. We focus on a lot of different areas. I joined TRC about a year and a half ago. Josh mentioned Locana. We were acquired. Locana was acquired by TRC. Locana was a GIS-focused consulting firm, and we primarily worked with utilities, primarily modernizing their GIS, moving folks to the utility network, and then integrating with other critical business systems like asset management. Again, that's why we have this deep partnership with the folks at GeoNexus, and we implement their tools on quite a few of our projects. We can move to the next slide. So I wanted to start by talking about kind of the state of integration in the utility industry. And this, of course, is not a surprise to any of you that are living it. But we're faced with a couple of things that make integration really important. And the first is that our infrastructure is aging. So, you know, the physical assets out in the field are aging, and we're being asked to stretch their life and get more out of them. At the same time, many of us are still using systems that are siloed and are aging. Your valve inspections might still be in an Access database somewhere, while your leak records or part of your leak records could be stored in Excel. And so, you know, we still have these disparate systems that make it hard to find and make good decisions with data. At the same time, we all know, we've been talking about this for many years, that our workforce is in transition. And so it might be that, you know, you don't really know where some of your assets are. You just had people who knew where those assets were. Or there's business processes that we haven't captured, like every fall somebody goes and you know, cleans these 5 catch basins so they don't flood during storm system, but we haven't actually captured that in any way. So as our subject matter experts leave, we are losing valuable pieces of intelligence. This is all, you know, facing us, and we're dealing with this while we keep getting more and more requirements and questions from, you know, the public as well as regulators. So, you know, people want real-time data. People want real-time outage management information. Regulators are asking for more complex reporting and analysis. And so, you know, all of this together is just pointing to this need to have what we like to call as a single pane of glass, or a single place where I can see all of my information. And I don't want to worry how things are integrated. I don't want to worry what the system of record is for X or Y system. I just want a way to pull all of this information together in a way that makes it easy to make decisions, in a way that saves money operationally, in a way that allows me to respond better during emergencies. And so that's really, in my mind, what one of the core tenets of integration is how do we, in a straightforward way, connect all this data together so that our decision makers can make good decisions and aren't worried about the IT details. We can move to the next slide. The last piece that I mentioned, you know, that previous slide mentioned, is modernization. And, you know, nobody wakes up on a Thursday and decides that they want to change, you know, the underlying integration between maybe their Esri and their SAP system. And so these systems don't get a lot of thought unless they break, or unless they're not meeting, you know, our requirements anymore. And there's really 2 ways that we interact with projects and with clients and actually have discussions about their integrations. And the first is enterprise transformation. So, you know, those of you that are both Esri and SAP customers, I feel for you, because you're in the middle of 2 generational transformations right now, and it's like a 1-2 punch. As you all know, you know, Esri is moving to the utility network and a services-based architecture, and is creating a significant amount of disruption in the industry as that happens. And similarly, if you're a SAP customer, you're experiencing the same thing with a move to a services-based architecture and a move to S4. And so the good news about these projects is, if they're handled correctly, they actually allow you to gather requirements and analyze business processes and look at these new modern tools and sort out how you might be able to implement no code or low code configuration solutions. So you're not building a bunch of customization into these new platforms. Hopefully you're not just lifting and shifting what you did, let's say in the geometric network to the utility network, but these projects give you a chance to be thoughtful about how you want your utility to work into the future. If that's the case, you do usually have a discussion about integration, and this is at a time where at many of our clients, we actually replace their existing integration with GeoNexus because it is a services-based architecture. It works with both, the utility network and with SAP S4. And the good news is you might be somewhere along that journey, but whatever you do within GeoNexus is a little bit future-proof when you move up to those two new platforms. The other place where we get pulled into integration discussions quite a bit are more point source technology implementation. So maybe your company is going to implement a track and trace program or a graphical work design tool, or maybe a mobile work management tool out in the field. These projects are interesting because all of these technologies kind of sit on top of your GIS and your asset management or your customer system as kind of foundational systems. They sit on top of those, but quite often they need information that maybe you didn't have or didn't plan when you planned your integration. So you might have an integration that does a great job of moving assets back and forth between Esri and SAP, as GIS records and then equipment or functional locations on the SAP side, but you never knew that you would need compatible units in SAP, or excuse me, in Esri, or customer data or load information. And so the interesting thing about a lot of these projects is we don't always wholesale change integration scheme or a regime for these projects. Sometimes we'll actually come in and stand up GeoNexus next to whatever your existing synchronization is and just pull over this new data like compatible units. And at a later time, realize that you'll need to make a wholesale change to your integration. And to be honest, in both of these cases, a lot of the discussions I'm having with clients right now, and a lot of the planning my team is doing with clients, is how you sequence all of these projects in a way that reduces technical debt or rework as much as possible, and just implement things in the right way. Should I start on a graphical work design project now, or should I wait until after the asset management part of S4 has been done? Or should I implement a mobile work management tool now, or should I wait until the UN upgrade is done? Those are a lot of the discussions we're having just to make these integrations as straightforward as possible. We can move to the next slide. So I wanted to talk quickly about two clients that we're working with right now. They're in very different places and have very different synchronization requirements and solutions. So the first is a client, it's a combined gas and electric utility with over, a little over 3 million customers. And they are at the end of the journey that many of you are maybe starting or on. They've actually implemented the utility network. They have moved to S4 HANA. You could say that maybe they're going to take a breath and rest a little bit, but now they're looking at all of the cool and interesting things they can do, that they have all this new technology in place. But one of the interesting things that this client did is they actually put all of their GIS data inside of SAP HANA. And so most of you probably understand that you can use a variety of different flavors of databases to store your Esri information. SQL and Oracle are kind of the two most common ones, but there's a bunch of different database platforms that Esri is certified out there. And HANA is actually one of the newest ones. And so SAP HANA is HANA's in-memory database platform. And there are some very significant performance benefits to storing your Esri data in HANA if you do a lot of spatial analysis or really complex analysis. But honestly, what I think is the bigger benefit is that all of your data resides in the same database. And so it simplifies your synchronization. And it doesn't reduce or remove the need for synchronization. You still have two different systems, Esri and SAP, that have two different ways of creating and editing data. And so you don't get past the fact that you do need some sort of tool like GeoNexus to synchronize objects between those two systems. But a lot of data, especially transactional data, let's say you're storing a last inspected date on assets. In the past, that might be something that you need in GIS, so you would actually replicate that data over to your GIS database. Now that everything's in the same database, I might be able to just grab that data on the fly, reducing the need to add more objects to my synchronization, and reducing the need to store that data in multiple places. Another place where we see people using HANA quite a bit is for analytics and reporting. And so, your GIS data now resides with your customer data and your work orders and your inspections. And, especially I know for some of the folks on the West Coast that are doing wildfire reporting right now, having all of that data in one place makes the reporting much more straightforward. And then you can turn around and push that out to an Esri web map or maybe a dashboard. And so you can better present all of those reporting results to decision makers and regulators. Then the last benefit of having some or all of your data in HANA is being able to actually drive workflows from the map. So given the choice between going to SAP and creating a new work order blind, or being able to actually find, let's say, a pole on a map, most folks prefer to interact with a map. And so, we can build functionality into Esri tools, which allows you to find one or more poles and let's say create a work order, and that will take you directly to SAP and allow you to, start that transaction in the map, but finish it by creating the work order in SAP. Let's move on to the next slide. The second case study I wanted to talk about is Tacoma Water, and Tacoma Water is actually part of Tacoma Public Utilities, which is power, water, and heavy rail, oddly enough. They're a municipal utility up here in the Northwest in Washington State, and they are a GeoNexus TRC customer. We've been partnering and working together with them for the last 3 years. And one of the interesting things about Tacoma Water is it's a good example of something you'll hear Umesh talk about here in a couple minutes, where we now have multiple plug-in connectors that fit within the GeoNexus integration platform. So it can really become a hub of all of your integrations. And water is still on that transformation journey I mentioned earlier. They're still using the Esri geometric network, and they're still using SAP ECC, the older flavor of SAP, but they're in the process of upgrading both of those systems right now. And TRC is helping them with their water UN migration. And the first step in that process is we actually configured GeoNexus to synchronize data from their Esri geometric network, their system of record where they're currently editing and creating and deleting assets. We're synchronizing that to the utility network, the Esri utility network. And so we just finished that work, and they now have a read-only version of the Esri utility network. And that is now allowing them to migrate read-only GIS tools and applications and reports and interfaces to the read-only UN, rather than having to do a big bang migration where, 2 years from now, everything has to go and you turn off the geometric network all in one day or in one weekend. We're now spreading that work out and reducing a lot of the risk of a big bang migration. Over the course of doing that work, Water's GIS team is already getting comfortable with GeoNexus, with GIP, and they will be ready to help us actually configure the UN to SAP synchronization when we start that later this year. And then, because they're comfortable with the tool and they've already been running it in one setting, it'll be easy to do that handoff, and they'll be comfortable taking it over long-term to manage the SAP Esri interface as well. We can move on to the next slide. This is my last slide. And a lot of these will probably sound a little bit simplistic, but I like to focus on business processes and requirements to begin with. And quite often we start a project and people assume that all of the equipment data in SAP is going to be synchronized to all of the assets in Esri, and everything just needs to be synchronized real time every day. And that's generally not the case. And so, being thoughtful about only synchronizing the data you need. If you have something like pipeline markers in your GIS and there's no workflow for them in SAP, they're not managed in SAP, there's no reason to synchronize that data across. Similarly, some clients will want to synchronize all of their attributes in GIS over to SAP equipment and vice versa, where you might not actually need a lot of that data from SAP in Esri or that Esri attribute data in SAP. So being thoughtful about what you sync and how much of the data you sync is really important. Having a really good understanding of how different data comes into the system and who creates it and who maintains it is really important. The path that a serialized meter takes to get, from SAP into the field and then into the GIS is probably very different than the path a water main takes. So being able to understand those processes is important. And then one of the benefits of GeoNexus is you can actually configure those different business processes depending on the needs and the requirements. We talked a little bit about transactional data, like work and inspection data. That is important to have real time. Obviously, with HANA, you can reduce some of that load on your synchronization, but having a way to deal with transactional data is important when you design your integration, because even if you don't need it at the time, you are going to get other apps like track and trace or graphical work design or other use cases probably that will need transactional data here in the next couple of years as you all kind of finish that Esri SAP transformation. That is the last slide that I have. And so I'm going to hand it off to Umesh.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll transition it over there to Umesh. Give him a second to get ready. Joe, thank you for that. That was outstanding. I think some great points in there. I think the one that we're seeing, that Umesh will talk a little bit about here that Joe mentioned is through all of this work and all of these projects and all of these challenges that are trying to be solved is this real drive to away from kind of point-to-point integration, right? It used to just be GIS to one other system. And now it's this building of an ecosystem to help support all of these different workflows and all of these different objectives that are trying to be reached through these larger projects. And so with that, I'll let Umesh talk a little bit about integration approaches that we see on the GeoNexus side and in partnership with TRC. Umesh, welcome.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Josh. You can hear me okay?
Can hear you great. Thank you.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. My name is Umesh Menon. So I lead the product team at GeoNexus. I've been with GeoNexus for just over 6 years, and my responsibilities are around collaborating with our user base and determining new features and functionalities, as well as the roadmap of where we take our products. Really excited to be here today to talk with you all. As Josh and Joe mentioned, integration is much more than the GIS and EM systems. The reality is that the modern landscape requires more than point-to-point integrations. So organizations want to get a holistic view, which includes data from CIS systems, outage management, and so on. So it turns into this spider web of integrations that you see here. Can we go to the next slide? So historically, the way this has been done is to custom develop these integrations. But the issue is that the volume of these integrations is so large that it's difficult to support this modern landscape. It's just become a much larger effort and investment to build and maintain these integrations. Go to the next slide. So to support the modern landscape, we've come up with an out-of-the-box platform that allows you to easily set up the integration and maintain it over the course of the integration lifecycle. So a few key benefits to note about our software. First is that we have productized connectors that understand the business logic for the systems that you want to connect to. Second is around the reduction of version lock. So this is the ability to use the same platform as you upgrade to different versions. So these are scenarios like you're upgrading to Maximum Application Suite or upgrading to the utility network. And since it's a product with a user community, we're able to hear pain points and evolve the software and bring innovation and have a roadmap that we track to. Can we go to the next slide? So we've been around for over 15 years in the integration space, and our solutions have evolved as a modern landscape has evolved. When we started, it was emphasis on GIS DAM, addressing various EAM systems and connecting them to GIS. And as we were doing that, our users started asking us about connection to CIS. Are you able to get data? I have a need to synchronize data between GIS and CIS systems. And we were able to do that. But more things started coming into play where things needed to be, the lines were being drawn in different directions. And we were looking at our point-to-point solution and needed to look at a different way of kind of evolving and looking at what we call multi-sync. So we changed our framework into a modern plugin framework, which was the GeoNexus integration platform, which allows us to synchronize more than just two applications now. And then from here came questions around new systems to integrate to. So we came up with generic connectors, one relational database connector, and a REST connector in a way to help with accelerating the process of connecting to new systems. And then our sort of the next evolution that came into play was there's transactional data that I need to synchronize, and I kind of need it more frequently than a nightly sync. So then came into play near real time. And as we think about our next evolution, as we get into showing this again, probably in our next webinar or so, we'll talk about a possible evolution to the cloud. And those are kind of the areas that we're looking into next. You can go to the next slide. So if you're new to integrations and just getting started on this journey, you might be trying to determine your options to integrate to this modern landscape. So here's a few options you might be considering. One is custom development. So this is writing code to create that integration. Another option is service accelerators. So this is where you have a consultant or a company that's created an integration, probably through a service, and they're repurposing it for another organization, and they've labeled it as a product. And then there's native connectors, connectors that sit within a system, such as a Maximal Spatial, maybe a PIPO or Hexagon toolbar. So many of our existing customers have gone through these various paths, and when we initially started conversations with them, they brought up various challenges with these approaches. From a custom development standpoint, just coming up with the resources gets expensive, and the timeline can go on and on. There's also a lack of control of how it's managed going forward. You really have to go back to development each time. When you think about service accelerators, they're not true products, and they can quickly get outdated. And then there's a question of who owns it, and we get asked this question a lot as well. Once the initial integration is built, and the person or organization that came in to build that, if they're gone, where do you go to? And the reality is that you're tied to that provider for any kind of updates. And then native connectors, they're just very tied into the system that they live in. Most of them lack geospatial awareness, and they have limited functionality when it gets down to what you need to actually manage the data. So when you look at these different approaches, there are a variety of pitfalls to consider. And at GeoNexus, we really try to build our platform to help with these gaps. Can we go to the next slide? So the biggest pitfall is that when you're trying to connect in this modern way, you can't have a one-off solution for every use case. You really need something that sits in the middle of all these different use cases that you're trying to implement. So the benefits that come with GIP, or GeoNexus Integration Platform, eliminating that custom development, so it's easy to manage within the platform. Our application doesn't sit inside any of the edge systems, so it allows you to upgrade your systems easily without having to touch the integration. And then you can realize your value quickly because the implementation steps are simplified through our UI, as well as the library of connectors, which allows you to get to production quickly. And then every time the process runs, you'll receive a report of what happens. If there's any errors from the systems, or just transparency of what's happening, that comes out of the box with the product. And then in terms of the system expertise, it's a fully supported product. We're continuously thinking about how we enhance it from a usability standpoint, expand the synchronization functionality, the reporting functionality. We provide quarterly releases to our users so they can take advantage of the continuous innovations that we're coming out with. And our product improves and evolves through our user community. This comes through our emphasis on customer support, as well as regular check-ins to show how we can be better, how we can improve. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So when we talk about SAP integration specifically, I guess first thing to note is what we're seeing from our side is that SAP is quickly becoming one of the predominant integrations with GIS that we're seeing. And Joe hit some really great points on best practices to consider when going into a project. But really, no matter the integration, the following needs to happen. You need to determine your source and target. You need to determine your alignment, and you need to determine your field mappings. And gaining uniqueness can be a challenge, especially when it comes to consumption data, where you have many records that are candidates to match to the other system. And then you come into one-to-many updates or many-to-one updates. And sometimes this is okay, but sometimes you don't know that this is happening either. And this is where GIP can help. One, by identifying duplicates. So through our reporting capabilities, this is something that you can identify, as well as through our filtering capability. Sometimes this is something that's done through the OData, and this is also something that can be helped through our filtering capability within GIP. I'll go to the next slide. So technical considerations. So GIP works with both out-of-the-box or custom OData services. For the custom OData services, we have a framework that we share with customers to help them in developing these. We also have a bench of partners that can help with developing OData services if this is not something in your wheelhouse. We also support the integration to GAP, where we leverage our GIS services that are deployed in SAP to connect to it. And then also connect to S/4HANA. Because we use OData services, it's very flexible and allows us to connect to ECC or S/4HANA. And a few things to note that we get asked pretty frequently. Determining the source of truth. So hate to say that it depends, but it does depend on sort of the workflows that are in play within each organization. Going back to what Joe mentioned in terms of finding, determining those requirements and what's happening, those use cases are super important to understand the source of truth in the data. And then what type of OData do I need? Most of our customers choose or need to build an OData service to satisfy the requirements of the integration, but it's something that we evaluate as part of the implementation project. And then how does GeoNexus work alongside FME? So there's a lot of strengths and weaknesses of each tool. And what we have found is with system-to-system integrations, our customers have various integration tools at their disposal, and have moved those integrations to our platform because of the ease of use and the configuration and transparency that our solution provides. Can you go to the next slide? And one thing we're really excited to talk about also is that in December, GeoNexus completed testing by the SAP certification team, and we've achieved certification for the S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition. And why is this important to us? One, it reduces risk for our SAP customers. It meets SAP security and compliance standards for how data is exchanged, reducing IT security concerns, system performance and reliability, ensuring we meet SAP's performance and scalability standards, ensuring compliance and data security. We're following SAP's data security and performance guidelines, and then SAP partner and ecosystem. So as part of the SAP partner program, we have access to their ecosystem, which allows us to stay up to date on the new things coming out from SAP and allowing our users to take advantage of those things. Right. Next up, we have, we're going to go through a demo of SAP GIS. I have here a architecture diagram. I'm not going to go through this, but this is available for reference for you to go back to about how we're actually connecting. If you want to go to the next slide, a couple scenarios that we'll go through. The first scenario is essentially that we're creating records in GIS, and we're going to execute GIP, and we're going to see those records created on the SAP side. And we'll go through showing our reports as well and going through some of the configuration screens so you can see sort of how things are set up there. You want to go to the next slide? We're going to modify a record in SAP. We're going to execute GIP, and we'll see that modification on the GIS side. And again, showing you the reports and some of the screens that are associated to that as well.
Thank you for taking the time to watch our demonstration of GIP, which is GeoNexus Integration Platform, and its capability surrounding integration between Esri, ArcGIS, and SAP and SAP GEF. So first, I'd like to show you a few of the environmental differences between the two, or data differences between the two systems, SAP and ArcGIS Utility Network, to show that what we're going to synchronize using GIP. So first, I'm looking at a map of GEF, and we can see the lines. I've turned on active equipment. We can see all of the lines in here and the points. The lines in this situation are low voltage underground conductors, and the points here are the streetlights. And if we look, there is a piece that's not here yet that has been digitized in ArcGIS that's ready to come over. The other piece that I'd like to show is this record right here. So it's a street light. Make this a little bit bigger to make it easier to see, so we can see this is low voltage street light. And if we go down here and we look at the manufacturer, it is currently unknown. And if we look at the model, it doesn't have a value. So what we'll be doing is using GIP to synchronize that data that's been now entered into SAP. When I look at that equipment, we can see it has a manufacturer and model number entered here, which someone did previously, and that needs to end up back over in GIS. So now that I've laid that out and shown the differences between the systems, we'll go in here and we'll use GIP to move that data back and forth. Start the execution. And while I do that, just want to talk about the things that it's doing. So we've got a few different data sets here. These data sets are an organization of the different components and their commonality. So we've got streetlight equipment, that's SAP, streetlight features, that's ArcGIS Utility Network. And then in the streetlight features data set, we're actually synchronizing the GEF features to the UN, right? Bringing the shape information over. So it's kind of a two-step process. We could consolidate those, but for clarity, we've separated those out. First create the equipment, which we have to do first, then create the features. And then we do the same thing for the conductor. Well, that's taking a little bit of time. It's not going to take a lot more time. I'll just go through some of the configuration information. So this is an SAP connection. I've noted S4, but a connection to ECC6 or S4 is exactly the same. We operate through OData, so this is the URL of the OData project, and then a user and password, a client that we're connecting to, because there are multiple clients in an SAP system. And then if I want to configure classes and characteristics on my data sets, I can set these pieces up. And what this is doing is based on that project that I put in here, it's going out and asking the metadata and what entity sets are out there, right? So I can see all of these different entity sets. The equipment set is the one we're synchronizing, but the rest of this is information to allow me to synchronize those classes and characteristics. And it's still operating, so I'm going to step through the other connections. So an ArcGIS Enterprise connection, we can connect to Esri multiple ways: ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Server, ArcGIS Online, or directly to the geodatabase using ArcObjects. This is ArcGIS Enterprise hosting our utility network, electric utility network. So in this, we have a URL to the REST services, and then a user and password. We've got some other things here that are optional, not necessary in our environment, but you can do different forms of authentication. So really it's as simple as, in our case, pointing to the URL for the services and then typing in the user and password. And then later in the data sources, when I show you those, it'll enumerate the services that are in there and then the different layers. And then the GEF connection. It's actually another ArcGIS type because GEF was modeled after ArcGIS Server 10.1. So it looks a lot the same. The services URL is similar to the ArcGIS Enterprise URL. Difference is we need to put an SAP client in. We need to know what client we're connecting to for data, and then the user and password. And let's check on the progress of our execution. So every time it executes, it'll generate a report if there was something that it did, even if there's nothing that it did in on-demand mode and in batch mode, it'll still generate that report. So this will just give you a summary. This summary page gives you a summary of how long did it take, right? It took us about 2 minutes to synchronize all that information. And that was a full synchronization. Near real time would be just doing deltas. It's a little bit faster, considerably faster in some cases. And then the final status report, this matches what you saw in the console, and we can see it loaded, the configuration and validated the configuration, everything passed. We've got some value lists to translate values between Esri and SAP, things like number coded domains, where we might have a number in the field in GIS, and we want to convert that to some textual format so it's readable inside of SAP. So it extracts all of those, and then it goes through and synchronizes each different data set. So the streetlight equipment, and in this case, we can see it created a record and then it updated 2 records. And then the features, it created a record, and that's that streetlight that wasn't there yet that we saw. And no updates existed, which is what we expect. And then when we get to the next conductor equipment, sorry, it started on this page, we have a create, right? So creating that equipment, that line, and then updating, and this one's updating back into UN. We're bringing the equipment numbers back. And then we continue on here. So the results of all of this, after it's executed, it'll go into different sections of the report. There were no errors, so we don't have anything in the errors. There weren't any orphans, meaning there wasn't a record missing from one side or the other after we're all done. Linking is in key generation are optional procedures, nothing there. But then we can look at the creates, so we get the detail of the creates. So it tells me it created this equipment. This is the sort field value that we pushed in. That's the link between the two systems. Very common for a lot of our customers is they use sort field, and it's using asset ID on the GIS, the UN side, and then the equipment number. And then it shows all of the values that were sent in and what the mappings were, so we can see in full detail everything that went in. And then also shows the primary key of the record that got created, right? So this is automatically generated by SAP in the OData. So that equipment number got generated, and we can go look at that one in a little while. And then it created the feature in GEF later, so we can see the point details where it got created, and it has to send, use that object, or the equipment number as the object key in GEF. So we're sending that over. And then when we get into the conductor equipment, there's a little more in the creation here. We just mapped more things. We've got a bunch of characteristics that we're filling in on that one. And then the conductor features here, it created that feature as well. And then when we get down to the updates, so that was all the creates. We get down to the updates. Now it's bringing the stuff back to the utility network. Here's where some of that value list comes into play. When we look at that record in, let me go back and show that. This is a manufacturer, American Electric Lighting, right? So that's the way I see it here. But the numeric coded domain value on the UN side is actually a 2. So 0 is unknown, 2 is at American Electric Lighting. And then the model is just verbatim, right? So what was entered on the SAP side comes over to the UN. And then these other ones are the things going back after the creation of the equipment. We're bringing the equipment number back over. Even though the sort field is our foreign key, we're bringing that equipment number back over. Helps for multiple things, and it's a little bit easier. So now, some of the things we'd like to look at here is going back to this creation. So here we can see the streetlight got created. If I go and grab that equipment number, we will see that one now. That just got created, and we can see, right, today's date. And yes, you can look at my calendar down here, it shows that it's April 3rd. So that value matches. And then we can see in this street light, the things that came in. Startup date was one of those things. So this one, when I look at, this is the underground conductor. And again, we can see that was created today. And I look at the class overview. These are the things that came in from GIS. So they got loaded in from GIS. So you can see those characteristics without going back out to GIS to actually retrieve those. They don't have to be duplicated, but they can be. It's a personal preference, personal choice. And then now when we go back here, one of the things that we're looking at, I'm going to move the map a little bit just to make sure the data gets refreshed, is we're looking at that manufacturer and model number on this. So if I scroll down now, remember it was unknown previously, the manufacturer, and now it's American Electric Lighting. And then our model had been empty, and now it's Audubon ATB 0. So it matches the data that came back, right? Just showing you the full circle. And then these two features got created over here. So if I move my map, I should see those get drawn in. And now we see those that came in here from GIS, those new features that were digitized.
Excellent. So that was a quick demo. Just as a note, that was about 10 minutes of a 25-minute demo that we have on GIS to SAP integration through the GeoNexus integration platform. The remaining 15 minutes or additional 15 minutes goes into additional features and functionalities and a little deeper into the use case. We will offer in the follow-up email that we send with the recording of this webinar, we'll offer the ability to reach back out to us. If you'd like access to that full 25 minutes and you'd like to see it in a little deeper context, please feel free to reach out through that email and we'll get you access to that. So now we have a couple minutes left as planned for Q&A. We've had a couple of questions come in. If you have a question, please feel free to enter it in into the Q&A box there, but I'll start with a couple that we've received. And also, thank you to those that provided questions during your registration. We've brought some of those in as well. And so I'll ask Umesh and Joe to be on the ready to answer some of these, but I'll start with one that we got just a moment ago. What are key decision points, or what key decision points have our clients, GeoNexus, used to decide to use GeoNexus versus some of the other data sync tools that are out there, be it built into SAP, or I'll expand the question a little bit to, to other systems that are out there. And I'll go ahead and take that. Umesh touched on some of this, but I think the three keys that I see, because I have these conversations every day, are really the constraints on development resources, right? The GeoNexus allows you to move beyond the development resources. When you're talking about SAP, there is the need for that OData development to get the initial connection set up. But, it's limited compared to fully custom development integration being built, right? And so, access to the resources and kind of the time it takes to set that up is one of the big ones. The other thing that I would say is the ongoing management of the integration, right? When there's Umesh talked on this or touched on this quite nicely. When you hire a group to build an integration, or you have an initial project to build an integration, what happens when that group walks out the door, right? And the integration is done. The ongoing management is often a big reason, because the out-of-the-box tools in GeoNexus allow someone that's not as technical and someone that can kind of own the GeoNexus platform to be kind of the owner of that integration. So that's a big piece. And then lastly is the handling of geospatial data. One of the things we've seen with different tools that are out there is while they are integration tools, whether they're built in as native, native connectors or native solutions into the system, they kind of have the focus on the EAM or the other system that's there, and they're not necessarily handling the geospatial data and the integration of that geospatial data in the way that needs to be handled. So that's a big one that we hear as we're talking to organizations day in and day out. All right. Another one, and Joe, maybe I'll go to you with this one, is there was a specific question about how do we sync land data in an Esri database with SAP?
Yeah, for sure. And I know, especially if you're using GEF or GEF within SAP, there is the ability to store geometries and store data within SAP, and land data, specifically parcels, can often be used, especially if you're an organization that owns and manages a lot of land holdings. And so from a synchronization perspective, it's really no different than any other GIS data that you might synchronize across. So, to get into the nuts and bolts a tiny bit, GeoNexus is pointed to a Esri feature service on the Esri side of the house. And so you could point that to a UN service and pick up utility network data, or you could point it to a service that has land-based records and synchronize those over into SAP.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Umesh, one for you. This one came through a bit earlier. How is GIP deployed? And they're asking kind of, example given custom hosted application server. And how does it interact with both the GIS platform and SAP? I know you talked about SAP a little bit with GeoData, but I'll let you expand on that piece.
Yeah, that's a great question. So GIP, there's an installer for GIP. It's typically installed on Windows Application Server. And then once it's installed, I talked about the OData piece connecting to SAP, but then on the Esri side, a few different ways we can connect. GeoDatabase, we have a GeoDatabase connector, as well as ability to connect using Esri REST services. And of course, if you're doing utility network, REST services is the route you're going to go for connecting into that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think this is a good one. And maybe I'll start with it, and Joe, then I'll hand it off to you for a little deeper technical detail. But does it work the same, it being GeoNexus? Does GeoNexus work the same as Fiori apps in S/4HANA? And the short answer is no, that GeoNexus actually would empower the apps, right? So my understanding, and Joe can build on this, my understanding of the Fiori apps is really that it's kind of a UI enhancement within SAP, and you can build some visualization tools through those Fiori apps. And really what GeoNexus would do is would empower the use of those different UI applications. And so, Joe, I don't, if you have anything to build on that, go for it. Oh, Joe, did we lose you? Are you muted?
Thanks, Josh. You're right. I think of GeoNexus as the plumbing underneath that's sharing data between Esri and SAP. And then you could build a Fiori tab to take advantage of that data or edit that data or do something else at the SAP user interface level.
Excellent. So we're right at time here. There are a couple other questions. We will make sure to follow up specifically with those that didn't get their questions answered and provide some answers through email. But I just want to take a second and thank Umesh and Joe. I know they're both very busy. And I really appreciate you taking the time both to present this webinar today and for the planning and the thoughtful insights that you put into the webinar in preparation for today's presentation. So thank you for your time. And then thanks to all of you for joining. As I said, and I'll close with this, we will follow up with you with the recording for this. And so hopefully you'll have a chance to kind of pass that out throughout your organization if you found this insightful. And so we'll follow up with the recording. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out through that email to reach out to me directly. You can reach out at info@geonexus.com, it's geo-nexus.com, or at josh.swenson@geonexus.com. So any questions you have, I'll be happy to answer those. And thank you once again for taking the time out of your day to join us today, and have a great rest of your week.